All right, the last time we left off, which was a while ago, we talked about why should we meditate. The reason is that meditation is the only process where we connect to ourselves. And until we connect to ourselves, we're not going to have peace or happiness in our life. No matter how much we try into the so-called real world, there's always going to be frustrations, there's always going to be a race, try to acquire something, along with the few things that you acquired, there are going to be 10,000 things that you did not acquire. Frustration is going to be there. And from our past experiences, somehow we don't learn because we are dictated by the mind. So we analyzed actually in the last lecture that what is the body, what is the mind, and how between the two we are constantly torn. Because to summarize, we discussed that the body is living in the past, because the body has been given to us over millions of years of evolution. It likes the past. Past meaning it has a fixed habits. It likes to wake up at certain time of the day. It likes to go to bed at certain time of the day. When the food is required, it requires food. When hungry, when you're thirsty, you require the water. All these things are basic things. And once the body's requirements are met, body is happy. So body, at the body level, there is always suffering if it doesn't get what it needs. But once it's met, there is relative happiness. There is no sense of positive pleasure at the body level. Body basically knows, the only pleasure the body knows is absence of discomfort. And that's how the body lives. So one basic thing we have to understand, if you want to keep the body happy, you have to have a regular lifestyle. And if that was the case, like animals, as long as they're fed, they will sit in a corner, they won't bother you. Once the lion does the hunting, his stomach is fixed, taken care of, he doesn't care if 10,000 cows pass by, he will not attack, because his stomach is filled. He does not live at the mind level. The problem is, if you go to the mind level, the evolution has catching up now. So now we have started living at the mind level. At the mind level, there is a positive pleasure. If I enjoy poetry, if I like the beauty of the nature, these are the positive pleasures of the mind. Mind actually enjoys these things, which is over and above the basic living. If I go through a waterfall, I can just pass by, drink some water if I'm thirsty and pass on. But the mind will appreciate the beauty of the waterfall, appreciate the beauty of the sunshine, the breeze that's coming in. All these things are enjoyments at the mind level. So mind actually, at the mind level, there is always pleasure. The problem that comes at the mind level is, these pleasures are short-lasting. Mind wants more than what it gets. Body is happy for whatever it gets, and as long as the comforts are met, body is happy, but the mind is never happy. So there are flashes of pleasure that are available at the mind level, but mind wants more and more and more. This is where the consciousness is expressing itself in a multifactorial ways. There is so much permutation, combination happening at the mind level. The world of the mind has opened up so much, like I would say billions of times more than the basic comforts of the body. Body needs shelter, body needs food, body needs water, body needs procreation, and that's about it. So our life,
Procreation
means the production of a babies, to make the sexual needs.
procreation.
So is to need to procreate. That's a built-in urge that we have. So as long as all these things are met, there is no rebellion happening at the body level. But the mind is another story. The mind wants different pleasures, but at the same time, if the mind does not get such and such pleasure, there is no problem. But once it gets it, it wants more and more of that. So mind becomes active, and there are so many factors coming into the play to keep the mind occupied. This is the world, this is the age of the mind. So mind has become very prominent now, and all the efforts are needed to really keep the mind occupied. Mind gets bored very easily. If it did not get bored, for example, I like to listen to Beethoven music or classical Indian music or whatever. I can keep doing it for 20 years, then it would not be a problem. Okay, I got something there, but that's not the case. Then I want something more. Then I want to explore this. Then I want to explore that. The mind never lets you rest. And that's where the problem comes in. And what happens is, because of the mind's activity, the body suffers. I want to stay up 2 o'clock in the morning, have a party. The body has to follow. Body could have gone to bed at 10 o'clock and could have complied with the natural laws and would not have been a problem. So now the diseases that used to be at the body level, like the famines used to be there, vitamins deficiencies used to be there, all these diseases that used to be at the body level are taken care of by providing enough nutrition and enough food and hunger, and all these things is taken care of. But now the diseases are of the desires. The diseases like diabetes, like cholesterol, heart attacks, blood pressures, tensions, stress, anxieties, all these are diseases created by the mind. None of these diseases are of the body. Body is suffering because of the mind. So now so that's why the point is to bring out the problems of the body and the mind. And our third existence is the soul. The soul has its own requirements too. The soul wants to know itself, wants to be by itself. And the problem in the soul is that until the soul recognizes itself, there is no peace. No matter how much you live at the body level or at the mind level, there is not going to be peace until you recognize the soul. Because the soul is behind everything. Soul supports the body, soul supports the mind, and all these activities are supported by the soul, and yet we don't know the soul. So to know the soul is the desire of the soul. Soul wants to fold itself ultimately. It's like a seed turning into a tree and going through all the years and years of maturing, producing the flowers, and ultimately the seeds. It completes the cycle. The soul started as a soul. It created the body. It created the mind over millions of years of evolutions. And now it comes to the point that it wants to recognize itself. And we have that capacity hidden somewhere in the mind. We just don't know that. Right now we are so caught up with fulfilling the demands of the mind and thinking that the pleasure will come someday, but it's not happening. So the real way to live is to recognize the limitations of the body. Living at the body level brings you at the animal level and never really lets you advance. The advancement has already taken place. The evolution already has taken place. Once we have started walking with 2 feet, we are never going to go back to walking with 4 feet. It just cannot happen. So the only way to go is to move forward. And the way to move forward is to recognize that at the mind level, sufferings are there. And the sufferings are relative suffering. There are positive pleasures. But at the soul level, once you recognize the soul, it's permanent. Once you have recognized the self, that recognition gives you a permanent bliss. So that's why the meditation is required. And the problem with most of the people is that they don't recognize the meditation as a state of the soul, as a state of attitude. It's a state of bhavana. So that's why they always take up meditation as an act. Now, act has a limited ways of handling things. In the act, you do something for a limited of time, whatever things are available with you, and you want to achieve the results. Because so far, that's all body has known. That's all the mind has known. Body says, okay, I'm hungry, I want such and such food, and my hunger is satisfied, my satisfaction is achieved. So our age-old thinking is that anything we want to do anything in life has to be an act. But that's not so. At the spiritual level, it's a totally different ballgame. Because spiritual level is a totally different way of looking at life. When you do something with all the things available to yourself, and then you do something and you achieve certain results, that is an age-old method. Same thing at the mind level. You want the pleasures, you want to see the cinema, or you want to attend the movie, or want to enjoy Häagen-Dazs, whatever, and you do that. Again, it's an act. So there is always a conflict. How many acts can you do in 24 hours? There's always going to be an effect of that action. Reaction is going to happen. Then you're going to be caught up into yoga, kshema, all these things. Whatever things you do, then you have to find the consequences. Your belly starts growing up, your cholesterol starts going up, now you're occupied with all that. So it just never ends, right? So the only way you have to realize that meditation is not an act. Act has a finite limitations of time and space. You do an action in a limited amount of time. Say, okay, I did the action, I wanted to buy a Jaguar or a Mercedes. All right, 6 months, a year, 2 years, it took me to accumulate certain amount of money, and then finally I had my Mercedes, and the pleasure started. Of course, not gonna last long, but it's besides the point. But at least there was a finite amount of time, because we were dealing with matter. The same way, the material things that are available, dollars and cents, we have to accumulate. We have to build up the balance, bank balance, whatever. And then finally you have enough money. So we're dealing with time and space. Time and space is all material. But meditation is not to do with matter at all. It has everything to do which is beyond time and beyond space. So meditation, we do not have to look at as an act. Because when there is an action, we have to manipulate time and space to achieve certain results. But you have to realize that whatever benefits you get from an action are also limited to the material level. And matter is something you can never handle. Material is continuously changing. There is a continuous inflow, there is continuous outflow, there is a constant changing. Rajneesh describes this as a shadow. We think that shadow is real. The shadow is not real. It's continuously changing. You stand here and you think your shadow is permanent? Think again. The sun is changing. Even if you stand at the same spot, 2 minutes later the shadow has shifted. There's a constant shifting. How much time can you spend on a shadow? The shadow is our ego that we have created. When I interact with you, I define myself as me only with your help, because I am not you. So I have to have you first. Then I can say, whatever is not everybody else, that's me.
Relative.
It's all relative thing.
By deduction.
So it's all the material aspects. So all the gains which are created by the actions and using the matter and the time and the space is going to be left in that field. So when that happens, your losses are also built into that time and space frame. So that's why the meditation takes you in a different sphere altogether. And that's what we have to understand, that when we are meditating, we are really connecting with the spiritual self. And until we connect to the spiritual self, happiness and the bliss is not going to happen. Na asti buddhi ayuktasya, na cha ayuktasya bhavana, na abhavya shantihi ashantasya kutasukham. Until you connect, yuktasya, we talked about that sloka last time. Yuktasya is somebody who is connected to the higher self. Na asti buddhi ayuktasya. Buddhi is the spiritual knowledge. Until you connect to the higher self, you cannot have a spiritual knowledge. As long as you do not connect and live in the sphere of matter, which is defined by the boundaries of the time and space, your so-called spiritual intelligence will never wake up. And it's like 5-year-old kid. How can he know about the sexual experience? He just doesn't have a set of tools to understand that. The same way people who are caught up in the matter, they will never understand the spiritual aspect of it, of our life, right? So somebody who is not connected to the higher self, his mind is going to be restless, because to him the matter is real. Somebody is living in the dreams. How can he know what is the state of awakeness? In the dream, you may be fighting, you may be trying to acquire things, you may be trying to build the motels and hotels and mansions and whatever. How can they know what is the reality when the state of awakeness? In the dream, you can fight forever. This is mine, this is yours and all that. But when we all wake up, we all gonna laugh. That why did we fight? For what? So that state of awakening is the state of connectedness, and that is called yuktasya. So ayuktasya means somebody who is not connected, his mind is always going to be restless. So when the mind is restless, he can never connect to the higher self, and you cannot have a broader picture of the whole gamut of the beautiful things that is created right in front of us, right? So na asti buddhi ayuktasya, na cha ayuktasya bhavana. Bhavana is meditation. Meditation cannot happen until you are connected. So the process of connecting to the higher self is the meditation. The meditation is bhavana. So, and na abhavyat shantihi. Until you meditate, you cannot have peace. Because the suffering is related to the field of material. Materialism is what has created the suffering. How much time we spend on the shadow. Once you come home, where is the shadow? The sun disappears. Shadow was a relative thing. You come home. This is your home. Your home is your spiritual self. And when you come home, there is no shadow. When there is no shadow, material disappears. And there is peace. You keep on fighting, creating bigger shadow, shorter shadow, this and that.
Yeah.
You live by the shadow. You think that, they give a fox woke up in the morning and saw that it was like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a huge shadow.
Yeah.
And he says, I have to feed this, I am this big. I have to feed this body. He thinks the shadow is real. And he keeps on working and he's, I have to eat a horse today. Right? And he keeps looking for horse. And he finds the horse but cannot eat, it's too big. But by the time he realizes it's futile to attack a big horse like that or an elephant like that, and then by the time it's like 12 o'clock, the shadow is this tiny. So maybe I should be happy with a little mouse or a rat. So it's changing all the time. We're spending efforts totally unnecessary.
Futile, yeah.
Right. Our ego is fake. Our ego is the shadow. Our ego is created by relativity. It's the relativity versus you against me. If I want to call myself rich, I have to have few other people who are poor around me. And I have to thank them to be rich, to become rich. Because if they were not there, I would not be rich either. So we have to realize this is an exercise in futility. And that's where the awakening starts. So that's why connection to the higher self is important. So let's go to the nitty-gritty, how to meditate. So the first step that we talked about, that we have to realize that meditation is not an act. It's not an act because our mentality has been that you perform certain actions, you manipulate time and space, you achieve certain results and you be happy. If that's the attitude, you will never be able to reach the samadhi. You will never meditate. So we have to remove that concept. We're dealing with a totally different ball game here. So meditation, and when it's considered as an act, it is operated at the mind level. Because this is all the mind knows. Mind knows how to manipulate the time, matter, achieve certain results and receiving the fruits of the action. Rajni says that a lot of people come to me and they say, I tell them that meditate. They try for 6 weeks, 8 weeks and they come back and they say nothing happened. The expectations of something to happen itself is an hindrance to the receiving the so-called fruits of meditation.
Then we should not expect to.
Nothing, no expectations. That's why we learn in SSY. No expectations. When the expectations are there, you creating your own ditch to fall in, right from the beginning. So do not expect the results, right? So the mind has been the seat of making you think that I can take over from here. Don't worry about it. I will take you there. And not realizing the mind itself has gotten into the ditches and sufferings and anxieties and the griefs and all this suffering for what? Because of the mind. But if we give the importance to the mind, that's when all these things happen. It's how in the Gita, Arjun is driving the chariot and Krishna
It's fighting.
right. If you do the other way around, right? And if put the consciousness, he turns into the Krishna consciousness to, if you think that Arjun is the owner of the chariot he should be supervising everything, and the whole chariot should be run by Krishna. That is the right way of doing it. Ultimately, because all the senses has to be guided by the consciousness. But we are letting the mind is supposed to be our servant. Mind is just a tool. Just the way the body was given to the animals, the mind is a tool given to us to function in this world. But when the mind takes over, it's like servant is running the whole house. And that was exactly what is happening. So our Gita is reversed. We are trying to run with the help of the mind. Mind is connected to the senses, and the senses are connected to the world. And we are operating our whole life thinking that mind is going to take us somewhere. And that is our cause of suffering.